Louise, we're out here in gorgeous rural Ireland out on the west coast to explore JJ Cory. Tell us a little bit about your brand.
Well, I'm the founder of JJ Cory. It was an old heritage brand that was sort of quite famous around here around about the 1890s to around the 1930s. Founded by a guy called JJ Cory, who was born locally, not that far away as the crow flies from here. He was one of 13 people in his family, and as a result didn't sort of have a place at home because you can't split a farm obviously between 13 people. So he went off to make his way in the world. He became a whiskey bonder in Kilrush, number 63 Henry Street, Kilrush, and he was very successful at it until about 1932 when he passed away essentially, and when whiskey bonding started to kind of die out as the Irish whiskey industry effectively collapsed.
Cool. So what is whiskey bonding? Give us a little bit of an explanation.
Yeah, whiskey bonding in the context of Irish whiskey is essentially the practice of sourcing whiskey flavours and new make and mature stocks of whiskey from distilleries, from multiple distilleries, and then blending them to create your own unique house style, essentially. So our modern interpretation of that is essentially we kind of tend to handle or look to shepherd new make spirit from the moment it comes off of the still all the way up until it sort of gets blended, bottled, finished, whatever. We look for new make spirit, we look for particular flavour profiles in that, and then we match the flavour profile of a new make spirit to particular cask type. We bring it back here to our farm to mature under pretty well controlled circumstances right here on the west coast, and then when that's ready we'll either put another cask influence on it or we'll blend it to sort of create our own unique house styles. So my job really as a whiskey bonder is to create a library of whiskey flavours from all over the country that we can then put together in lots of different ways to create our own unique whiskies.
That is so exciting. But how did you kind of delve into the past and bring these two things together?
Whiskey bonding used to be one of the main ways that Irish whiskey was sold up until around about the 1930s. The reason for that is very simple. There was hundreds of distilleries on the island of Ireland in the 1700s, early 1800s. A lot of them were very, very busy just producing, just distilling. They weren't that interested in branding, bottling, blending. So they used to sell their whiskies on to the bonders. Okay. And there was two kinds of bonders. There was really big guys up in Dublin who had huge big bonded warehouses and were supplying the Commonwealth or the British Empire as it would have been back then, essentially. And then there was really small guys down here in like all around the country, essentially, like JJ Cory. And those really small guys were very often publicans. They were mercantile owners. They would sort of source much smaller parcels of whiskey. They would, send empty casks they had lying around in their pubs to be filled up at their local distillery and then bring them back. And they would create special, really small scale bespoke blends for their customers. So if you were the wealthy merchant family in Kilrush, JJ Cory would have had your own housekeeper's blend for you. And this was common all over the island of Ireland.
Yeah.
It had totally died out. And the reason it had died out is very simply when the Irish whiskey industry collapsed due to geopolitical circumstance, the remaining distilleries that were left in the early 1900s cut off supply to the bonders, and they began to brand and bottle themselves, and the bonders couldn't function anymore.
And how difficult is it to get hold of these amazing spirit today to put into your casks?
It's getting really easier, a lot easier. Like I started the business in 2015 when there were really only 3 or 4 operational distilleries on the island. We're creeping up on having 25 to 30 distilleries that are producing now, depending on what day of the week it is. So the variety has mushroomed in terms of the whiskey flavours that I can start to sort of collect. So it's a good time right now to be a whiskey bonder, and it's probably the only sort of time in history really that you could bring it back, because we are starting to see that variety in production again. So it still remains difficult. Irish whiskey's hot at the moment. The industry is sort of massively in a resurgent stage, and there's a huge demand for it. So whiskey bonding is all about building relationships with new distilleries and with wholesalers that are out there and stuff like that.
And I guess it means that you've got the freedom to kind of piece together all these amazing whiskies to create something that's completely unique and not available in the market elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the trick exactly. Is that, you know, if you start your own grain to glass distillery, you're going to be just exclusively using your own sort of supplies of whiskey to get out there into the market. We have the luxury of being able to choose from a huge wide variety of styles and approaches to whiskey making that we can sort of bring together, and that's only growing over time. You know, we've seen so much change in the last few years in the industry, so we'll really come into our own in relation to that in the next 3 to 5 years.
So exciting. I can't wait to see what happens.
It's a privilege and an honor. You know, it's a once in a lifetime experience to be involved in an industry that's being reborn. It's a once in a lifetime experience to bring something back to that industry that has totally died out. So I'm really honored to be part of that.
Amazing.